Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you might be. I am Nicole BC, and you know everything. Strike a pose. I've been having a thumbnail battle with all of the platforms because I don't have enough subscribers or followers or whatever to get to choose. This might be the reason why, because it shows the most wackadoodle screen grab of me during these. Hi, hello, how are you? I re-recorded this last week with really shitty audio, and this is me leaning into making it good enough for you, but mainly for me. Let's be real. Most of this I do just for me, which is good. This is one of my most favorite topics. I have been gaming it solidly for 2 years, but probably my whole life. We're going to talk about time. And you'll often hear me say time is make-believe, time is a construct. Time is simply a place where we have agreed to meet in this space-time continuum. I'm making an X with my hands for those who are listening. X marks the spot, right? But the other, one of the reasons I wanted to create this podcast, one of the reasons I call the book club, which I haven't done in a long time, don't at me, the Quantum Business Book Club, one of the reasons I love listening and reading and not so much watching, but that's actually, I don't know, it kind of plays into all of this, is like you and I are in this very moment together connecting. Now, I don't know when on this X marks the spot space-time continuum you are engaging with this. It could be the day it gets published, December 2024, not exactly sure which day at this rate, maybe never. It could also be in 5 years from now, whatever that fucking means in 5 years from now. So I think it's fascinating that we're literally time traveling when we engage in someone's art and content and words, when whatever platform or medium that we do that. Some of you might actually be reading this because that's your preference or that's your ability. Some of you might be psychically transmitting this because you're a fucking superhuman. Who knows? There's some new science coming out about telepathy in terms of those who have been diverse in their abilities right now, especially nonverbal autistics. And that information is really interesting. And I'm currently reading a book called The Beginning of Infinity, which kind of turns physics on its head. So the point being, we've all approached time in a pretty specific way. And I work with people to help them understand not only how they work best, but how the people that support them and the people they support also work best, because oftentimes that is at odds with each other. And we've spent the last couple hundred, if not couple thousand, if not tens of thousands of years using time as this metric, right? As this way of measuring. And typically what we're measuring is activity, at least for the last 200 years. That's certainly what we've been doing in like the Western capitalist patriarchal systems that we're all kind of engaging in here. And here we are, left feeling exhausted and burnt out and ultimately pretty disappointed. And for some of us, even really frustrated and resentful of the output we thought we would have received based on this unit of metric time and this measure of input effort. I want to help you see different ways of redefining time, especially time for creativity, but obviously for this podcast's purposes, time in your place of work and productivity, and how you can take these quantum leaps, how you can connect seemingly disparate points on the space-time continuum into the same meeting spot, right? And not just experience a different way of working with time, but a different way of relating to time. What if I told you that time isn't the fixed, rigid force we believe it to be? What if the way you think about time is actually holding you back from creating, from thriving, and from not just doing your best, but experiencing whatever your concept of is the best? The best, air quotes. In this episode, we are going to explore this idea that time is a construct, not as a throwaway phrase or one of my BZ-isms, but as a practical concept you can actually leverage to transform your work, your business, your workplace, your organization, your relationships, even the way you think. So I'm going to talk about how you as a leader, and we are all leaders, we are leading ourselves first and foremost, let alone the various sort of metaverses as I'm thinking of them now that we all coexist in, whether it's your family, your community, your neighborhood, your workplace, the different clubs or organizations, or even online spaces that you're participating in. So you can help to both recognize the common understanding of time, but then leverage it. So it actually feels like it's supportive and expansive and a place that you can create within. So keep listening because we're also going to talk about how you can slow time down, how you can use this construct to fuel you and to motivate you and maybe even organize you. But it doesn't feel like a limitation. It doesn't feel like a scarcity. So we're using time in a way that feels innovative and groundbreaking and ultimately results in what might feel like these quantum leaps, these huge jumps in terms of your own success, however that feels and shows up for you, but also your own ability to create and to get the dang thing, whatever that thing, that result it might be that you're looking to achieve, including just simply feeling a different way. We are going to learn how to slow down time and stretch time so it feels abundant rather than scarce. Like time is always slipping through your fingers or time always gets the better of you, right? We'll do this by discovering how to structure time for creativity without sacrificing organization. Does that one hit for any of you? And you know me, I like to give you 3 kind of what I think to be pretty fun takeaways so that you can play with this because it's never for me to tell you what to do or how to do it. You know everything, my friend. But hopefully I can give you some different ways of thinking about things because as you know, we are all wired a little bit differently. And what works for me right now, firstly, isn't going to work for me forever. But secondly, might not work for you. So you get to experiment whatever resonates with you, as in like you hear me say something and it really kind of lights you up and you go, oh, wait, I want more of that, please. That's for you. The rest of it, just ignore my jibber jabber, okay? I'm trying to do my best to share like a little bit more personally with what's going on. And I really started to play with this idea about 2 years ago. How can we like slow time down? You know how when you're in that like we'll talk about flow state and we'll actually talk about the researcher and scientist who is credited with coming up with that actual term in positive psychology. But until we get there, I have worked with artists and creatives my entire professional career. And I was raised by people who have wildly different concepts of time, but are incredibly insane and compulsive when it comes to time. And so I kind of had the best of both worlds. I had someone who hated to be late, to commitment and planning incredibly seriously. And then I had someone who was so fucking busy. Every single second of their lives was scheduled and there was no time wasted. He literally raised me to believe you have to justify every second of your existence. And so with those 2 people who actually perceived each other's use of time to be like wildly irresponsible, I was I was forced to be able to create situations that allowed me to be successful despite the fact that one person hated to wait and be late and then the other person hated to have any minute not filled with productivity. And so I found myself right in the middle and I kind of experienced time like a metronome. I'm constantly counting the beats and I have this like time has always gone incrementally slow for me because of this awareness. Like when people say time flies, that's never made sense to me because I'm so acutely aware of every second of every day, see aforementioned justify it, that it like crawls for me. And so I've always had this kind of big gap in my own way that I relate to and experience time in the way that everybody else kind of talks about it. And this kind of 2-year experience reading Gay Hendricks' Conscious Luck, which I have a quantum business book club about. I'll link that episode for sure. That really helped me understand how time can move and what luck feels like and why. Won't get into that now, but I've been playing with this idea. What if we release this construct of time? What if I, embrace my artist's era and I flow when I flow and I work when I work and I trust that everything will get done and truly play with it. And it created, some big wins and what have shown up as big losses, but like, I can't control a hurricane. Like I can't control death and life. And as much as I'd like to think, I think that's within my repertoire. And my conscious mind certainly has tricked me into believing. But when I release this construct, it allows things to happen when they happen, and then gives me this opportunity to truly create and respond in a way that feels leveraged and supportive. And I work with a lot of people and have worked with thousands of people over the last 25 years to help them kind of tune into that rhythm, that metronome for themselves, also varying based on what environment they're in or what activity they're undertaking. And that was a really long story. Perhaps why I don't do more of that. But that's why I'm so fascinated with this idea. And obviously in business, and you hear me talk about 21st century business and new business building, we are starting to finally create infrastructure that allow people to work the way they work best. I think that was one of the quantum leaps we took in 2020 with remote work. We've gotten a little bit away from clocking in and clocking out, although I know a lot of you still pay attention to that, and more into results-based metrics. We've still got a long way to go with that. And it's not just the leaders and the bosses. It's actually a lot of the worker bees, and it's our peers that are now going, well, I was there longer. We'll get into that as well. I'm going to hit pause on story time and get into this episode. So let's start with the basics. Saying time is a construct doesn't mean time isn't real. That's not what I mean when I say time is make-believe. I mean, we believe what time is to be, and then we make it. This means that the way we measure and perceive time is a human invention. Clocks, calendars, deadlines, they're tools. Calendars, deadlines, clocks, they are tools we created to organize our lives, but they are not universal truths. So just a little bit of background for y'all. I've been trying to dig a little bit deeper into some research and some of the, shall we say, materialist ideas around time, the constructs upon which our constructs are built. So Immanuel Kant is one of the OG scientists who was sort of alive during the early 1700s. I think he passed early 1724 to 1804 are the dates that I have here. And for you history buffs, you know what was going on during that time. He argued in his Critique of Pure Reason that time and space are not external realities, but rather frameworks created by the human mind to structure experience. This is when, at least in our sort of Western recorded history, we started to really debate this construct of perception. So from there, Einstein and his theory of relativity begin to radically impact our understanding of time, showing it as relative and interconnected with physical space. He demonstrated that time is not a fixed and universal constant, but it varies depending on factors like gravity and velocity. This scientific revelation further reinforced the idea that time is not an absolute. It is independent. And it moves differently depending. I mean, loosely, this is kind of what happens when an hour feels like a week. Or like what I was talking about, time's always moved very slowly for me. What happened 2 months ago literally feels like a different lifetime. 10 years ago, I have a difficult time even understanding my relationship to time that has passed in my experience that far away. Whereas I'll hear other people say it seems like 10 years ago, 2014 was last week. That's kind of what Einstein was talking about. Obviously, with the theory of relativity, it gets more like a lot more scientific than that. But Henry Bergson, another scientist and ultimately, philosopher first and foremost, but getting into the scientific method and this desire for proof and evidence, he distinguished between mechanical time, aka time measured by clocks, and lived time experienced subjectively. And you might have even heard this concept in terms of chronos with a K and chronos with a CH. This idea of time as being measured by seasons, by the sun, by the orbit of the earth, as opposed to it being measured by a Gregorian calendar or clock. These ideas, both Henry Bergson and Immanuel Kant and obviously Albert Einstein, it helped us understand that this notion of time is truly subjective. And then we start building on it. And I think it was Carlo Rovelli who, in his book, in 2018, so we've now fast forwarded about 100 years, The Order of Time, he explained that time is not linear at all. And this is when we have that big, like, wait, what do you mean? if you move far enough in, space or into the galaxy, time moves at a completely different rate than it does here. And this has to do with the principle of thermodynamics, the second principle of thermodynamics, which says that entropy is always increasing. And the journey from order to disorder is a one-way street, which means as we move from this, what we thought was this finite, predictable, proven, physics-based reality out, we moved into complete chaos. And we only ever move towards that. And that's what I'm reading about in the beginning of Infinity, and it breaks your brain. Like, it breaks my brain. So this idea that time is a construct, time is make-believe, became popularized really in the last kind of couple hundred years. And it's become a very trending topic on social media and with the sort of new age spiritual movements, mainly because of this postmodern philosophy, but this demand to always know more. We got, science was trending in the 1800s and 1900s, and I mean has maintained up until very recently, where we started to question even the laws of science and physics that we thought were fixed in stone. And time is no different, right? So as we move into this 21st century and we start trying to build structures that will withstand the tests of time, we are forced to ask ourselves, what the hell does that even mean? Time is a preference. It flies, time drags, time stands still. The verbs alone suggest that we have always understood time is subjective. Time is evidenced by our language, for it becomes more easily appreciated as a set of layers, a complex collection of structures, and our use of the word when becomes a matter of convenience. We make time. Time is a commodity if we can make it. It is ours to buy, to spend, to save, to keep, remember, or waste. And I think this becomes really, really interesting and intriguing and so worthy of this discussion because, me, freedom is my raison d'etre, right? It's the whole purpose. And I so often, and I spent the last 20-ish years defining that as having enough money so that I could do what I want when I want. But I think we're all kind of realizing you can have as much money as you want, but if you don't have time, then you can't do what you want when you want. And perhaps the ultimate definition of freedom is time, at least for some of us. And without the tool of money, time affords you the ability to be resourceful and creative and empowering ways. And it is incredibly impactful then when we start to think about it in terms of our own working relationships. And again, you can use that word to define relationships in a physical workspace, or working relationships as any relationship that you're engaging in, including your relationship with time. So in the 21st century, where speed and efficiency reign supreme, we've allowed time to become a scarce resource. But the scarcity perception, mindset, experience limits our creativity and fuels burnout. You'll hear me talk about this often as level 1, 2 in the Energy Leadership Index. And nothing wrong with energy, but when we find ourselves rushing, Gay Hendricks echoes this in Conscious Luck, when we find ourselves pushing, when we create this false sense of urgency, I mean, how many of the deadlines result in death? Right? Like, again, I always say you're not a doctor. And even a lot of that manufactured urgency, we'll talk a little bit about triaging in a moment, but is to give ourselves this motivation, this desire to move from a place of fear, which is ultimately and always going to leave you limited options. Fear results in fight or flight, potentially freeze or fawn, but none of those are idyllic. If you're trying to come up with not just a life saved, but a life transformed, doing it from a place of what else, of the binary, as I'll describe kind of level 2, where it's an either or, a win-lose, and I'm just trying not to lose, that's not a win-win-win, right? That's not a creative space of being. Yet we're all rushing for deadlines. We're using false deadlines. We're using threats and this not enoughness to push ourselves. And that's why we're all fucking exhausted right now. So when you notice this pattern and you recognize you respond much better to a fire or a emergency than you do just an item on your to-do list. That's an opportunity for you to explore your relationship with time. There is a trust that you get to play with. There is this leap of faith that will arrive. And a lot of us play with it around this inquiry. Will it all get done? It always does get done. 2020 hindsight, everything always works out. You can kind of start to notice how we start to justify this inquiry. Am I willing to test this? Am I willing to hypothesize that it's all going to work out, even though I don't know yet? And instead of pushing myself to figure everything out 5 minutes ago, what if I just trust I'll figure it out in exactly the right moment? How does that impact my own energy, literally, like my own exhaustion or motivation, my own creativity or problem solving in any different situation? So ask yourself, am I letting the clock dictate my productivity? Or am I designing my day and my time to support me in my work with the people that I work with? I have a lot of different ways of approaching this. You know, when you think about, well, Sally always waits to the last minute and Jose is constantly chatting and it doesn't seem like he's focused. And I don't even know where Jeremy's at. I haven't seen him on Slack all day. Like, those individuals may be using time in a different way. And what if that, oh my gosh, I think my neighbor's dog got out because I hear her yelling at Cosmo in her New York accent. I don't think you can hear that, but it was mildly distracting. The point being, Cosmo doesn't give a fuck about her schedule or time, and, nor that I am recording right now. And that doesn't make Cosmo a bad dog. It just makes Cosmo a crazy fucking pug. Anywho, I digress. So I know I promised you some time magic, aka slowing down time. What do I even mean by that? We'll get into how to do that. But right now, what I mean is, and you've experienced this when you've lost track of time. That is what I'm talking about. It's not magic. It's not woo. It's just when you get into what we have qualified now as the flow state. And so Mihei, I had to spell this out. Mihei Csikszentmihalyi. That dude has a name that gives Brant Zawadzki a run for its money. Mihei Csikszentmihalyi is described as the father of flow state. And he is one of the OG researchers. He coined flow state, but he is one of the people credited with positive psychology. He still teaches at the Claremont schools, which if you're in California, or quantum physics, engineering, it's a group of 5 different schools that are really, really, really solid in sort of like northeast LA. What's the other P one? I don't want to say Pasadena. It's even further north and east than Pasadena. Anywho, bunch of smart fucking cookies hang out there, including Mihei Csikszentmihalyi. Okay, I'm getting a little lost in the weeds there. So he coined the term to refer to the psychological state of optimal performance. That is flow state, optimal performance, a state of optimization. He's a researcher, educator, public speaker, and co-director of the university's Quality of Life Research Center. And he talks about when hours feel like minutes because you are fully immersed in a task. Flow happens because there is a perfect balance between challenge and skill. And there are plenty of studies out there. This one that I'm referring to came from the University of Massachusetts, and it shows that these mindfulness practices, aka creating a state of optimal work, not only reduces this concept of time as a pressure, but it creates this sense of expansiveness, of fuck around and find out. That is where innovation occurs. That is where problem solving that doesn't just put out the fire, but keeps any fire of that kind from ever starting again. That's where that level of co-creation truly exists. So how do we get there, BZ, right? Firstly, it means you prioritize this type of work. You find a way to allocate uninterrupted time for this type of task. Now, for each of us, that's going to be different. I know people that build spreadsheets that would make your brain melt. It is their pornography. Now, that doesn't feel like a creative task for me. For me, that's my writing. But how and when that happens in our day, and you'll hear me talk about it, like what happened upstream to get there, that's what you get to workshop. Neuroscientists like Cal Newport, so you can look up his research on how to emphasize deep state work. That means you're minimizing distractions, you are making time feel less fragmented, and therefore you discover this abundance of thought, of flow, of ideas, of creativity, of trust and faith. That's that level 6 energy in the Energy Leadership Index. You're going to redefine urgency. And so that's, again, going to apply to you very differently than it applies to me. Some of us actually respond very well to deadline. When I talk about procrastination as a superpower, that's what I mean. And my friend, this is not about fake deadlines. So all of my ADHD people out there, hello, I see you. I am you. We can create all the fucking false deadlines we want. We are going to blow right through those. I'm talking about them real deadlines that the client is waiting on, that your team expected you to have done last week. Like when you know you're one of those people that does actually thrive in that energy, just build your schedule around it. Leaders who challenge artificial deadlines create a culture where employees feel supported rather than rushed. So how can you do that? How can you recognize that deadlines are just simply a way to create this sense of urgency, and let's shift it out of scarcity to motivation? What does this mean to you? You get to define urgency, but not everything is urgent. It might be important, it might be necessary, it might be a need to rather than a want to, but it's not a have to right now. You cannot grow or scale or influence if you continually react to everything as urgent. This is where we talk about triaging. So in a hospital where people do die and they go into the emergency room, the ER intake personnel are very responsible for triaging. And what that means is they use their skills and experience to understand what is an actual life or death situation and how does that particular issue jump to the front of the queue. Whereas everybody else who's in there who also thinks they're in a 911 situation, it is a life or death situation, they're going to wait because it's just not as truly urgent as the need to have to right now as the other issues that are occurring in that room. That takes practice, that takes skill, that takes presence, that takes staying calm, that takes a level of trust and faith in your own innate knowing about what needs to happen right now. And when you're able to take the space, whatever that looks like, again, for you, it's a couple slow, deep breaths, it's going outside and feeling the sun on your skin, it's phoning a friend. I talk about all of those strategies 1,100 times. But simply bringing yourself back to this moment and going, what is the most important thing that needs to happen right now and it potentially makes everything else easier or unnecessary? My favorite quote from Gary Keller, the one thing. Embrace strategic pauses. Every single boss that's in all of my little books, they talk about how do you fuck with your own routine? How do you enforce yourself to hit pause? Because if your brain works anything like mine, it does not stop. Sleeping, meditating, working out, like it's just shifts of focus, right? But by taking a 2-hour block in the morning, if you're Tim Ferriss, you take 3 days every 3 months, you take 3 weeks every year, and you put it on your calendar, and it is a non-negotiable. For some of us, it's every 15 minutes after 90 minutes of work. Again, play with it. Most of us haven't truly ever committed to that. We don't even believe ourselves when we say we're going to do it. So just start there. Start little incremental blocks. When I work with my people about getting organized, about getting proactive, about firing themselves from being a firefighter and moving back into actually leading and working on their business rather than in it, what most people have underestimated is that it takes time to get organized. You've got to organize being organized. And that is something to also bake into your schedule. So not only are you creating these blocks of flow space, not only are you purposefully and proactively taking pauses, but you are also then looking at these commitments and at these blocks of time and at these urgent tasks and constantly reshuffling so that you are being proactive and creating and making time for things that are truly important, not just reacting to the urgent fires that are popping up all over the place. Okay. So now what we're really talking about here is balancing creativity and structure. Leaders often feel very challenged by this reconciliation for results, organizational results, and freedom. Freedom, creativity demands freedom, right? Like we need that uninterrupted time. But yet you also need an answer from Joe in accounting, and Joe's currently working on one of those magical spreadsheets, but you're asking him to pull up some data on some transaction that occurred 2 years ago, and it's actually a 45-minute rabbit hole you've asked him to jump down. So how do you balance that? In a study titled Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes, it was proven that by scheduling creative tasks at consistent times and allowing people to work the way that they work best. So you are not stifling spontaneity, you're literally planning spontaneity. You are going to create a higher rate of productivity. And what this might look like, I mean, this is like a really sort of banal example, a boring whatever example, but you put your Slack in do not disturb. You're on it, but it's got a little circle, red circle with a line through it, right? And this means that even if the big boss person is calling you, it is going to remain unanswered until you finish the thing that you're working on. Now, obviously, that's going to show up a little bit different from everybody, but this is when they say train people, teach people how to work with you. When we talk about doing a user manual for your own work and productivity and success, that's what we mean. Each of you do something completely fucking different. The way I work is completely fucking different. And on different days, the way I work is completely different. And so some days you're going to get my undivided attention for 8 hours a day. Other days you're not going to hear from me for those 8 hours. And that is how I've taught people to work with me. You work in cycles. We all have an ultradian rhythm. This is our body's natural rhythm. And most people are moving in 90-minute cycles. I completely believe some people just don't work like that. But by tuning into when you work best and how you work best, that those activities that happen upstream, you will find a rhythm. One of my clients I remember was trying to essentially start a YouTube channel. They wanted to become a thought leader, and they were really struggling with the research component of these videos. And what we discovered was that their most creative time was between like 1 and 4 in the afternoon. And for most of us, that is a dead spot in our day. We're kind of crashing from whether it's our morning caffeine or our morning workout or our morning whatever we did. Most people are eating their first meal sometime in the middle of their day. And there's just this very natural sort of physical response to what's just preceded the last 8 hours where we kind of get into this slump. And I don't know a lot of people, and I mean, when I say that, this is the only instance I can think of that someone like hit their stride at 1:30 in the afternoon. And we would not have discovered that had we not been experimenting and really tuning into when do the ideas drop in? How do the ideas drop in? What happened upstream of that? And for this particular person, they started to block out their afternoons, which again, for a lot of people just won't work. Most people block out their mornings or they block out their evenings, again, depending on a whole litany of factors. But that like 1:30 to 4 o'clock, and this person worked within an organization. They were not the boss. They were starting their own thing, or they had started their own thing. Anywho, that's a whole nother story. But like it was not easy to block out that time. Is where I'm trying to go with this. And it made all of the difference in the world. Batch similar tasks. That one pretty much goes without saying. We've been talking about that for ages. What I will say is what feels like admin or hard to do or have to do is going to be different for you than me. Like that accountant who creates beautiful spreadsheets and that's their art. That is a have to and very slow and laborious process for me. I can do it, but it is not the best use of my time. Therefore, if I'm going to need to get into spreadsheets and I'm going to batch. I used to do this. I made my Mondays the have to days. And because I just wanted to get all of the things I hated doing out of the way at the beginning of the week. I'm not a procrastinator. I don't like things undone. So by tackling those activities first and foremost, it allowed me to get them out of the way and just opened up the rest of my week. I've changed that now though, because what I found is I was exhausted on Tuesdays, and then I didn't really find my stride until somewhere on a Wednesday, and then it really only gave me the last couple days of the week, which ultimately worked for me, but most other people are doing the opposite. And so I found myself moving in a very opposite, like energetic direction from others, and that just didn't fly. This is what I mean by you got to organize your organizing, right? You look at what's happening and if things need to adjust, and you'll know that because you'll feel like you're beating your head against a window or a wall. Probably, hopefully not a window. That would be even worse than a wall. Like we're continually adjusting and being proactive with how we are responding to what's going on in our environments. So I'm going to shift back into this little breakdown. So you find your rhythm, you batch your tasks, and then some people are going to use the word discipline. Other people can use the word ritual, but I like practice. Practice implies I'm going to do my best. This is how I show up. This is a repetitive process, and it might not always go according to plan. Therefore, I get to course correct and get back on track, or I get to recognize I'm beating my head against that wall. And perhaps this is something I need to take a step back from and really look at how I'm approaching this, not just if I'm doing these pre-planned activities or pre-canned activities in the right order at the right time, blah, blah, blah. Morning and evening rituals are proven to ground your day. Discipline, commitments, however you kind of want to, whatever word is going to resonate best for you. But recognizing when you have a kind of set of repetitive activities that start and end your day, that does seem to lend itself to optimal performance. And there are a million different examples and studies around this particular one. Okay, we're getting there, y'all. So let's talk about these kind of big ahas, right? And why, when I say time is a construct, how you can actually quantum leap your own success by leaning in to this idea that we make time. Time is make believe. You believe it to make it. When you achieve a quantum leap in your business, like let's say you've just landed a major deal, or you've just disrupted your industry, or you've just sealed the deal on a partnership you never thought was possible. It can look like it just showed up out of nowhere. It can feel like this huge, impactful new reality that you're now existing in just suddenly showed up. But this isn't random. And some might argue there are no coincidences. The Harvard Business Review wrote an article that argued breakthroughs happen after sustained periods. You thought I was going to say of hard work. Nope, incubation. So we feel like we've plateaued. We feel like we've been in this holding pattern. I can feel so many of you being like, yes, yes, yes. We feel like we're not making any progress at all. And maybe it's even 2 steps forward and 18 steps back. But your subconscious mind is actually processing all of this information, all of this learned experience, all of the lessons from the failures during this quote unquote rest. It makes these moments of success, these aha moments, feel instantaneous. And this is another leap of faith that you can play with. What if this gestation period, this incubation period, is just simply what precedes the birth? That true aha, creative, innovative, unique moment that you haven't experienced yet. You're integrating all of your experience up until this moment, and something really amazing is going to happen. That's how we start to make time. Time is energy, not hours. So that rather than measuring time by minutes clicking on a talk, what if you look at the energy that is being inputted into time? So by finding that optimal performance, what you're asking is not how much can get done in a particular amount of time, but how can I perform within any amount of time? The most effective leaders focus on managing their energy. Tony Schwartz and the Energy Project found that by aligning work with your own individual peaks and valleys, your energetic bursts and regenerative moments, this will increase your output significantly. I really, really like working out in the mornings. It's one of those, like, I like to get it done, but it feels like one of those upstream activities that when I work out in the morning, the rest of my day just tends to flow. And it's a really great way for me to also shift from like a deeply sort of internal, creative my space to like actually being out in the world again. And It's fucking hard. It's not enjoyable. When I work out in the afternoon or evening, I'm always like, God damn, like gains for days. I can lift heavier. I can go longer. It feels like fun. I kind of get it. I'm like, oh, this is why people actually enjoy this. It would probably make a lot of sense for me to shift my workouts to the evenings. So I get to play with that, right? I get to test it. And when the days are longer, this is easier. Well, it's anywho, that's a whole different story. But the point being, how you show up is going to affect your desired results. And that's what I mean when I talk about the energy leadership index level and picking and being proactive and choosing a perspective, an attitude, a mindset, the energy level that's going to connect you to those desired results. It is an illusion that any of this is a linear process. Success isn't a straight line. Time is a spiral. And so every time you think you're experiencing the same problem over and over again, you are bringing with you all of the wisdom that you gained, all of the resilience that you discovered, all of the confidence and trust in yourself that you can learn every time that problem happened before to this very moment. You're actually being this opportunity, you're being offered this opportunity to apply all of that to this now moment. And it's either going to show you, I got this, or there's a completely different way of approaching this, because I'm not just going to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. Even though we play with this idea of overnight success and quantum leaping, what we realize is it's a culmination of a lifetime's worth of work. And innovators, disruptors, change makers, wildly successful people appear to leap ahead suddenly. But that leap is built on this faith, which was discovered through years, a lifetime's worth of quiet, consistent effort. So I know what you're saying. Well, in my business or in my life or in my work, I'm constantly being asked to prove myself, to justify it, to provide the evidence of success. So then how can I stop using time as a metric and instead use time as a construct? So firstly, you just start talking about time differently. I've been really working on I can't wait. That creates this sense of urgency. It suggests that like everything that's going to happen in between now and then is like a waste. I can fucking wait. And in fact, the anticipation of that is one of the rewards. And so like maybe I even want to push that experience off. You've experienced this with travel, with getting someone a gift that you're super excited to give them, about having a surprise. Like we get so excited about it. That's the joy we get in the moment. By the time the thing actually happens, I mean, maybe you can relate to this. It's not like quite as good as we had imagined it being, but how fun was that process leading up to it? So please, let's wait. And in fact, saying something like, I am so excited for, or I am really looking forward to, might be a different way of just simply reframing, I can't wait. So rather than I don't have enough time, the question you get to ask yourself is, how can I make time? How can I design my time to feel supportive right now? When we encourage ourselves to think about this concept of making time, what we do is we shift out of this scarcity and into this abundance, to use like the woo terms, right? We focus on outcomes. So I work with a lot of my people on KPIs, which makes everybody want to jump out of their skin. But when we tell people this is how we're measuring success, and it's not if you clock in 15 minutes early or stay an hour late, I would argue that's actually an incredibly inefficient use of time. And we should be encouraging people to clock out early, as long as you're not like client facing and you need people on the floor and whatever it is. But like if you can achieve the same results in less time, fuck yeah. We should reward people for that, not be looking for some safety blanket of someone sending Slack messages or emails at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. That is burnout culture. So encourage your people, your metrics to focus on effectiveness, efficiencies, results, not just hours work, and lean into this faith, this trust, this belief that everybody is actually doing their best. And if they're not getting the results you desire, there are different ways of investigating that outside of, well, how long have you spent on it? I am constantly asking my people how long they're spending on things, because we should be workshopping ways of reducing that input so they are working less for no other reason than work less, live your damn life. Why? Because we're measuring success differently. So instead of measuring productivity by the time amount spent, measure it by meaningful milestones achieved. So if time weren't a constraint, how would you structure your day? Rather than like, if you had all of the money in the world, what would you do right now? Ask yourself, if I could do anything I wanted with this day, what would I do? What would my day look like? Would I set an alarm to wake up in the mornings? Would I be prioritizing certain tasks ahead of others? I go through this with everybody that I work with. What's your ideal day? Take it minute by minute. What could you achieve if you approached time as a partner in your success rather than a limitation? I'm actually going to give you a few little homework items just because this is what I've done to really play with time. But firstly, I want you to start blocking off some time, whether it's 5 minutes because you don't feel like you have anything else available to you. Ideally, you're looking at 90 minutes for this particular experiment, but you're working towards an entire day where you don't have any limitations with how that time's used. And I'm just going to leave it at that because we've already been talking for a while here. I also would like for you to play with this idea of a strategic pre-planned pause that you actually stick to. Again, it can be 3 minutes. I would encourage you to get to, 20 to 30 minutes. Maybe let's go 15 to 30 minutes. And whether that's occurring every 90 minutes, like every 90 minutes, you're taking 15 minutes, every 3 hours, you're taking 30 minutes, something to that effect, but just incredibly proactive about actually just taking a complete and total time out. And you're not doing anything with it. You're breathing, you are staring out the window, you're giving yourself some time to just have thoughts and think. I don't know how anyone's going to come up with a disruptive industry business. I didn't say that right. A business that disrupts industry or is truly this completely unique 21st century construct when they're consistently filling their time with other people's thoughts, whether it's words, whether it's sounds, whether it's visuals. And we're just moving from one soundbite or one video or one conversation to the next from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep, which I think a lot of us are doing. I've been absolutely, with the whole like election cycle and disaster news and just needed to dissociate, very much got into a pattern of that, which I am actively pulling back from now. Okay, enough about me. Lastly, I would like you to just kind of look at your life or your business and identify a place where you have very much used time as a scarce resource, as something that is continually running out and you've got to rush and grab and hoard in order to make it. And just notice where has time been a really challenging aspect for you, and perhaps just open to a way of reframing that. Time might be a construct, but the way you relate to it is entirely within your control. As a leader, you have the power to create an environment where time feels expansive, supportive, and creative for not just you, but again, anybody that you work with. So the question isn't how much time do you have? It's how you choose to use it. And I know that goes without saying. This is how you redefine those terms and you create space for breakthroughs, for growth, and ultimately happiness and success and peace. So thank you very much. That was another deep dive. And this is obviously one of my favorite things to tinker on. So I'd love to hear from you if that were useful. I'm not going to keep asking for reviews and likes and blah, 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 blahs. I feel like you will share this if you need to, if you feel called to, if you think this could support somebody. And all of my stuff is still available online. I've made it completely and totally accessible. And I will let you figure out how you want to make that exchange balanced for you. It feels balanced for me, which is why I put it all out there. I don't know if I have anything else to say about that. So thank you very much for being here. I love you. And yeah,